In this video, I'm going to share with you everything I crocheted and knitted in 2025. If we've not met before, hi, I'm Em. I'm a crochet designer and a content creator. And on this channel, I used to have a monthly podcast where I gave you updates on my personal projects and also like my crochet designs as well. And I haven't done an episode of that since November 2024 for a whole range of reasons. I want to relaunch that podcast in 2026, so treat this as kind of a catch-up podcast episode. I didn't think that I had actually done that much personal crochet and knitting in 2025, but I have surprised myself with how many projects I have laid out around me off camera. So yeah, there's quite a lot to talk about. This is going to be a long video. It's going to be really chatty. So grab yourself a cup of something yummy, maybe a project to work on, get yourself comfy, and we'll start off by talking through my finished crochet projects. I'll pop some timestamps down here so that you can jump around between crochet and knitting if you're not interested in my knitting, for example, because I know a lot of people follow me just for the crochet. I'll also link like yarns and patterns and things down in the description if there's anything here that inspires you to make it too. So we're going to start with the two blankets that I finished in 2025. These are crocheted granny square blankets and they are both from my own design. So here we are. I'll try and like lean back a little bit, try and get as much of this on the camera as possible. So this blanket is a patchwork granny square blanket. It's inspired by Anne of Green Gables and Patchwork Quilts. I did a whole video in depth about this blanket and the other blanket I'm going to show you that I put up 2 weeks ago. It's like 50 minutes long and it goes really in depth about the story behind the design, about how you can join the crochet along. So I will link that video at the end of this video for you to watch next, as well as down in the description. So I'll just give you some brief details about it because I don't want to be repeating myself to people that watch that video. So this is a fingering if you're American or 4-ply if you're UK weight blanket. I made with a 2.5mm crochet hook, and it consists of these quilt blocks. There's 16 of these quilt blocks. Each one is inspired by a character from Anne of Green Gables. For example, this one is inspired by Marilla, and this one is inspired by Cordelia. So this was a collaboration with a yarn dyer called Skein and the Stitch, and she was dyeing a advent in 2025 that was inspired by Anne of Green Gables and asked if I could come up with a design to go with that, and I did, and we've since become friends. Like I said, this is a sock weight blanket made with a yarn advent and 4 skeins of undyed yarn, and the pattern also works with DK weight advents, and I couldn't resist using my advent that I bought in 2024 and opened in 2024 to make a second sample. And this sample is my personal version of the blanket, not the blanket I made for the business. This one is for our living room actually, because the colours match our living room, which has kind of like got a bit of an autumnal woodland theme. So this is my second version of the blanket. The DK weight version of the blanket is a little smaller than the fingering weight blanket because you get less meterage in a DK weight advent, but it does use 4 undyed skeins again. And I just had to play around with some of the colours in this one, and I really love the colours. This advent that I bought in 2024 was from the dyer Adventures in Yarncraft, who has sadly since stopped dyeing. She's closed her business. And the theme was, I think it was drinking cocoa around a fire, which I really loved. I loved the kind of that imagery, and the colours are very, very me, very autumnal with pinks and mustard yellows and like these coppery oranges. I love them so much. They're like my favourite colours to work with in crochet. I really, really, really enjoyed playing with these colours. This one's probably my favourite block in this blanket. I really love the pink and the gold together. But yeah, I also show this blanket in a lot more detail and talk a lot more about the yarn in that video as well. So I'll just direct you to that video if you want to learn more about these two blankets, and we'll move on to projects that you haven't seen yet on this channel. So like I said, 2025 was quite a big year for me, and me and my partner, we had our civil partnership ceremony. If you're not familiar with what a civil partnership is, it's kind of like a modern form of marriage. It has the same legal rights in the UK. So for that we got dressed up, and I really wanted to have something handmade that I had crocheted and ideally designed for my outfit. And I thought a shawl would be lovely, and I had some yarn in my stash called Rowan Patina, which was like a mohair blend yarn with sparkle, and it is my most favourite shade of pink. And I really wanted a pink dress, like a pink wedding dress for our ceremony, and I didn't end up finding one that I liked, and I did actually end up going for like a champagne-y off-white one, but I really wanted something in that my favourite shade of pink. It was the same shade of pink that my engagement ring was in. I'm not actually wearing my engagement ring right now, but it's the same shade of pink, so I really wanted to kind of like tie that together. So I crocheted myself a shawl. I don't know, it's quite big, so I don't know how much I can get it on camera. So this is a triangular shawl, and it is my own design, but it's not one that I've written up as a pattern. I'm not sure if I am going to write it up as a pattern. Let me know down in the comments if you would like a pattern for this shawl, because if there's demand, I would definitely write it up. My hesitation with not writing this up as a pattern is the yarn has been discontinued, and I always get complaints when I show samples in yarn that people can't get or is sold out, and I really want you guys to be able to use the yarn that you want to use, and with this being a discontinued yarn, I don't know, I could get a second sample made in an alternative yarn and just be really clear about it. So I'll talk a little bit about the design. So this is a triangular shawl, and you start here and you kind of work. It's almost like half a big giant granny square, if that makes sense. This is like half a giant granny square. We work back and forth in rows here. And if I bring this up closer so you can see the stitch pattern a little bit better, it took me a lot of tries to get this stitch pattern perfect. It's a take on the Yorkshire blanket. Yorkshire blanket is behind me for a reason. I got it, I moved it over from the armchair for a reason. So the Yorkshire blanket is a sampler blanket I released in 2024. And I had this block in it, which is called Lambing Season, and it has these groups of 3 puff stitches here. So I wanted to take that and kind of translate it into a shawl pattern, and I also took the same if it wants to focus, the same border here, this scalloped border, to put onto the shawl as well. So this shawl is kind of inspired by the Yorkshire blanket. The Yorkshire blanket has 12 granny squares that are inspired by my life in Yorkshire, and a lot of these squares are from experiences with my partner exploring the Yorkshire countryside, and that's the inspiration for a lot of this. For example, the border is called the sunset border because it's inspired by watching the sunset with him. So I really wanted to bring that into the shawl, and the stitch is different to the one that's used in this blanket. I have made it a little bit more lacy, as you can see here. And I do have these eyelet rows as well to kind of break up that lace. And then I'll show you the beautiful border. I think the border really makes this shawl. And there we are. I hope it's focusing. It's struggling to focus on this yarn a little bit, I think. But yeah, this is really beautiful and I was really excited to wear it. And then there was a heat wave, so I couldn't wear it because it's mohair. It's so hot. It's a mohair blend with sparkle. I don't know how well the sparkle comes across on camera. It's got gold, so it's pale pink with gold sparkle and it's fluffy from mohair. I can't remember the blend of fibres. I'll pop it on the screen down here, like the blend of fibres that it is. And yeah, I think I used a 5mm hook as well to make it even more lacy because it's a DK weight like yarn. And I gave it a really aggressive block, like really aggressive. And now it's beautiful and drapey. Look how drapey that is. It's so drapey. I love it. I love it so much, but yeah, there was a heat wave, so I didn't actually wear it. I got Liam to take a quick photo of it for me, but I couldn't wear it for like our proper photography photos or anything. It was just so hot. So, and also we kind of eloped. Everybody knew we were going to do it, just us, but we didn't kind of tell anyone when or where, basically. And then, yeah, so it was just us and witnesses. So I thought it would be nice to do like a dinner. And so we did a friend's dinner and like a family dinner. Well, we were going to get dressed up for the family one. So maybe I'll wear that. It's in September. It'll be fine. It'll have cooled down by then. Nope, it was even hotter. So yeah, I think I saw in the news the other day that it's been like the warmest year, like 2025 is the warmest year on record in the UK. And it was a really hot summer here. For the UK, it was a hot summer. So yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. Crocheting a mohair shawl for a July wedding. I don't know. I kind of want to go back and like, come on, you should have done it in like cotton or bamboo or something summery. But no, I decided to go in mohair. To be fair, it was stash busting. It was a stash busting project because I had no idea what I was going to use this yarn for. So at least it like became kind of like, it is, I still see it as my like civil partnership shawl though. That is kind of how I see it. Maybe if it's cold, I'll wear it on our anniversaries or something. I don't know. I haven't actually worn it as like a scarf yet either, because mohair, I have sensitive skin, and mohair doesn't usually work against my skin either, so I don't really want to wear it as a scarf. What was I thinking? I don't know what I was thinking. I really don't. So yeah, mohair shawl, let me know in the comments if you would like a pattern for this. I've also finished crocheting another shawl. So here is the other shawl that I finished in 2025. It's also a DK weight shawl, and it's a little smaller than the other one because this one I actually do wear as a scarf. I've been out and about in it. I think I've even worn this in like a vlog, I think. So yeah, I really, really love this. I love the colours that I chose. I kind of went for autumnal, but not brown and green, like autumn minus brown and green, basically. That was kind of like where I was going with this. And then the border is actually the same border from my Granny Love blanket. It was one of the first tutorials that went up on this channel. It was my first crochet along I ever did in, like, I think it was March 2023. So the channel started in February 2023, and then this was the first I did the tutorials. I think it was March or April 2023. That was a blanket. Is it in here? It's not, it's usually in here. So yeah, so I crocheted a blanket. I'll put a picture on the screen, called the Granny Love blanket, and the colours were inspired by autumn. It's a giant granny square blanket. I actually crocheted this before I started my YouTube channel, and then I put up a poll when I started. So I started the YouTube channel and we had a Facebook group, and I wanted to do crochet alongs in the Facebook group, and I put up a poll of like, what one of my blankets would you like the first crochet along and my first kind of like pattern on YouTube to be my first tutorials on YouTube, and the giant granny square blanket won. So that became our first one, and we're coming up on the third anniversary of that. So I thought I would turn that blanket into a shawl so we can wear it, and it's kind of like I want to release this pattern around about the third birthday of my YouTube channel. That's like I think it's the 9th of February so I want to release it around about then, or into March as a third anniversary of that original crochet along. This is not going to be a crochet along, it's just going to be a pattern that I'll release with a tutorial. Of course, there will be a free tutorial for this on YouTube. And I just love it. I love the colours. I love that it's repeating colours, so you don't have to worry about like colour placement. So the original Granny Love blanket was like 12 colours, but it was like random, organised randomness. Whereas this one's just like a colour repeat, and I really love that. And I also love, I've worn it a few ways, but I've actually wore it like this, and I kind of love it because it looks like you've got like a scarf with diagonal lines. I usually wear it like that. So yeah, and it goes really well. When I wear this jumper and I'm going out, I try and take this as well because I think they match really, really lovely. I really love this. It is made in a yarn called Yarn Smith's Merino DK, which is a superwash DK weight yarn. And there will be a yarn pack when I release this pattern with the colours on. I can't remember the exact colour names now. There are 4 colours total. So there's this very, very like peachy pale pink, but it's almost like a cream. It comes across as a cream. This peachy colour, this mustard, and this coppery orange. And I used 2 balls of all the colours for the body of the shawl, and then an extra ball of the coppery orange that I can't remember the colour name of for this border. This pattern is currently in testing as well. The test ends at the end of January, and I'm really excited to see because some of my testers have chosen some really interesting colours to crochet their shawl in, so I'm really excited to see that. So yeah, that was the Granny Love shawl. Those are my proper finished crochet projects. I have got a couple of knitting finished crochet projects, but I have some projects I call them finished, but they're not actually a thing. They're not actually like a finished project I can show you. So the first one, we talked a bit about the Yorkshire blanket here with the 12 different granny squares inspired by Yorkshire. I loved designing this. Writing it up and filming the tutorials was, I think, back in 2024, I wasn't a very experienced designer or tutorial maker, and it was a very, very strong learning curve making this sampler blanket. And I swore off samplers, right? I swore off samplers. But in like October, November, I just had this wave of inspiration in that I want to design more Yorkshire squares that you can add to your Yorkshire blanket, like as expansion packs, kind of like collectible expansion packs with themes. So that's what I've been working on. So I've got 2 bundles to show you of some finished granny squares. So I'll talk a little bit about where my brain is going for this, because so the Yorkshire blanket is just general squares inspired by my life in Yorkshire, because I'm not from Yorkshire, but I've moved to Yorkshire. I think we're coming up, it'll be 10 years in September that I moved to Yorkshire. So these were kind of like, there's some of them had like, we've got a Yorkshire Rose, we've got one inspired by the moors, one inspired by the Dales, one inspired by Mills. So that's kind of where the original inspiration came from. What I'm doing something similar with the new squares, but they kind of got a theme wrapper. So the 2 that I've got to show you are, one is inspired by the city of Leeds, one is inspired by the city of York. I'm not going to show you these squares because they're a bit of a mess, but I'm currently working out designs for a forest inspired bundle of granny square patterns as well. I've also got some planned out for ones inspired by some places you might go on a day trip in Yorkshire, like Brimham Rocks or Armscliff Crag. And then I've also got, so they're kind of like rocky outcrops in Yorkshire that you can go and visit. And then I've also got some planned out that are coastal themed and beachcombing themed, and I've got so many ideas for these granny square blankets. I don't know where this is going to end. I currently have 24 squares planned out. 24, the original blanket only had 12, so yeah, 24, and these will be the same kind of depth and quality patterns that the Yorkshire blanket was. They are in-depth patterns with round by round photos and in-depth video tutorials for each square as well. So that I'm going to be bringing that, because I know a lot of people really enjoy the Yorkshire pattern because it's so detailed and in-depth and kind of no stone left unturned. And if you're more of a beginner crocheter, they kind of help you build up those skills with crochet, with different crochet stitches. I have a whole video about the Yorkshire blanket as well. I will link that down in the description, as well as the one about the imagination quilt, because they're kind of like my 2, I kind of see them as my 2 flagship patterns. So the first bundle of granny squares are 4 granny squares inspired by the city of Leeds. That's the city I used to live in. I lived there for quite a long time while I was doing my midwifery training, and then while I was working as a midwife, and then when I became disabled. If you've not heard of Leeds before, it's a really big urban city. It's quite sprawling, it's quite large. So my battery just died while I was talking mid-sentence, so I'm sorry we got cut off there, but we're back now. So I was talking about the inspiration for the urban collection, which is the city of Leeds. I can't remember how far I got to, so I was probably talking too much, so we're just gonna go through the squares now. So this first one is called Skyline. Or is it Skylines? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's either Skyline or Skylines. So basically the inspiration for this is skyscrapers. And I used to live in East Leeds, and as you went down the York Road, as you drove towards Leeds, you could just see in the distance all of these skyscrapers. So that's kind of the inspiration for this. If I show you this bit, can you see there how the chain one spaces kind of make skyscraper shapes? So that is my Skyline square. And then the next one is the one that's not inspired by architecture, but I thought it was quite funny. So I used to, when I was a midwife, I used to get the bus all the time. When I was like on a student in community, I'd get buses to all sorts of places over Leeds when I was going to like GP surgeries and stuff. And then there's 2 hospitals in Leeds, and I was always on the bus between the 2 hospitals, and just, yeah. So I was just always on the bus. And the UK has a queuing culture, and I know we're known globally for the queues, and I experienced that. People queuing for buses, usually very calmly, all in a neat row, queuing for buses. So that was my inspiration for this block, which is called Daily Commute. And if it wants to focus, it's having a bit of trouble focusing today. That is in focus now, isn't it? Yeah, so it's having a bit of trouble focusing today because I'm not using natural light. I've had to put a light on because we're in January and it's really, really dark outside, even during the day. So yeah, so this is Daily Commute, and you can see these lines of puff stitches represent people all in a row at a bus stop. Love this square so much. It's very, very abstract though. These are like very abstract inspiration. I kind of take a concept and think about how I can translate that into these squares. And then the next one is inspired by city parks And the two that I'm thinking of is when I was a student, there was Woodhouse Moor, which is near the university. And that's like a big square with paths around the outside. And also Roundhay Park. I went to Roundhay Park quite a few times in my time in Leeds. So this is the square inspired by city parks. And this one is called, what is this one called? I think it's called Urban Oasis. Off the top of my head, Urban Oasis. Yeah, and we've got these kind of like paths coming out from the centre, and then these popcorns I like to think represent like bushes and trees. Basically, I wanted it to be very geometric because city parks are often very geometric because they're, you know, they're not natural, they're very managed, and they've often been planned with like straight paths and like maybe like a fountain at the centre with paths coming off from it and things like that. So that's Urban Oasis. And then this last one is quite abstract again, I think. So this is inspired by some of the architecture in Leeds city centre. There's a lot of Victorian architecture. We've got like Kirkgate Market, we've got all the shopping arcades and the Corn Exchange. And I kind of wanted to take some of those shapes and concepts and put them in a granny square. So this is the architecture square. So at the centre here, this bit here, that represents the dome on top of the Corn Exchange. It's mostly, to be fair, this is mostly Corn Exchange. And then this bit here is kind of supposed to represent the, if I bring that up closer, is kind of supposed to represent the, in the arcades, they have like domed roofs, but they're kind of like really long, half cylinder roofs that are glass. So that's kind of where I went there. And then we've also got like the Trinity Centre, which has like a curving modern glass roof. So kind of glass roofs, I guess, is what inspired this square. And kind of that shape is, I kind of see that as kind of like the Corn Exchange from the top down as well. So yeah, so that's architecture. And this one actually, the pattern for this is written up. I haven't done the tutorials, but the pattern went to my tech editor yesterday. I'll probably be recruiting testers for this in February with a view to release the pattern in March. That's kind of where my brain is at the minute. And I want to try and release these bundles for granny square patterns every 2 to 3 months. The tutorials for these granny squares take quite a lot of time and energy. Because they're usually around about an hour long after I finished editing. They can take me up to 4 or 5 hours to film each square, and then I've got to edit them on top. So yes, it's quite a lot of work that goes into these patterns, so I need to make sure they're spread out and they're not interfering with the other things I have planned for Meema Makes. These are kind of like in between my main pattern releases for 2026, probably into 2027, because like I said, I've got like 24 squares planned. And I will probably come up with more as I come along. I've got so much inspiration. I'll show you my inspiration boards in a bit, actually. Actually, I might show you my inspiration boards now. So I've got my iPad here, and I'm hoping that this will come up okay. So I basically did a lot of like mind mapping, and then I kind of brought in some photos. So these are some of my York inspired squares. So I've got what I'm going to call it here, the inspiration down here, and then kind of like where my brain has gone as I'm thinking about designing each of the squares. Yeah, so this is kind of like how I come up with the Yorkshire expansions. I don't think I did that with the original blanket, but this has really, really helped me, like planning them out like that on my iPad has been really helpful. So yeah, we'll move on to the ones that are inspired by York. I really love York. It's a very much a touristy city, and it's got so much history and so many things that I could have been inspired by. Again, I think all of these bar one are also inspired by architecture. This bundle is going to be called the Historic Bundle, and it's going to be 4 granny squares again. So I'll show you those again. So we've got this first square, it's called Cobbled Lane. And this is inspired by the Shambles, which is, I think, is it the oldest or the best preserved medieval street in England? In the world? I don't know. It's got some kind of like stamp. I can't remember what it is. But yes, but it's a really famous place. It kind of looks a little bit like Diagon Alley. So there's a lot of like Harry Potter shops there now. It's very touristy. But that's the inspiration, it's Cobbled Lane. And the next one is inspired by York Minster, which is the cathedral in York. And this is actually inspired by the rose window at the cathedral. And I might put this square here and put a photo of the rose window next to it, see if you can see the inspiration there. Because I think this one turned out so well. So yeah, I think I've called this one Cathedral. That's literally what I've called the squares, Cathedral. The next one is inspired by York City Walls. It's got quite famous city walls that are a tourist attraction. You can go walking around on the top of them. And some parts of the York City walls date back to the Roman times, and they've been built on at various different points in history. So I really wanted a square inspired by them. I'm not 100% sure how happy I am about how this square came out. I think the texture of it's not going to be very obvious on camera. No, it's not very obvious. It's more obvious in person. Basically, the front and the back post stitches create a brickwork effect, but it's not the most obvious on camera. If I bring it right in, can you see that? Maybe. It's a little bit more obvious in person. And then the final one is inspired by York's Viking history. So York was a city called Jorvik. It was ruled by the Vikings for quite a while, and there's a lot of Viking history in and around York. So I really wanted to draw that into inspiration for a square. This isn't inspired by like a Viking building or something. It's actually inspired by something called the Helm of Or, which is like a symbol from the, is it a symbol? Yeah, it's like a symbol that the Vikings used for good luck, I think. If I've got that wrong, I'll put some text on the screen. Editing, please check that I've remembered that right. Basically, it's inspired by a symbol called the Helm of Or. And this is this square. You can kind of see, if I put this here, I'll put the Helm of Or next to it so you can kind of see that inspiration there. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. It actually turned out looking a little bit floral. Especially if I hold it there where you can see it behind it. It looks a little bit floral, doesn't it? But the texture of it definitely is inspired by that Helm of Or. So yeah, so that is the historic collection. Expect those patterns to come out in 2026 and hopefully a lot more bundles of granny squares too. I've currently got 2 patterns that are in development, crochet patterns that are in development that are crochet in rows based, but I'm thinking once I've done those, I'm going to primarily focus on granny square and modular designs, so hexagons, octagons, triangles, stuff like that, like more geometric stuff. It's the stuff I most enjoy. It's the stuff that clicks better in my brain. So I really want to, once I've got those other 2 patterns out that I will talk about later in this video, then I'm hoping that at that point I will be just focused on those modular designs. That's kind of where I want Meema Makes to go. It's my love. My love is granny squares and hexagons and modular designs. So that's kind of where I want my patterns to go. So expect more fun granny square patterns from me in 2026 and 2027. And then the final finished project is kind of like lots of little mini projects. Basically, it's a whole load of swatches. I have this basket that's just full of swatches. Literally, it's so heavy. And it's overflowing and things keep falling out the top of it and I need to transfer these into like a box or something. But basically, usually on this channel, especially in 2025, I put up so many crochet tutorials, so many crochet tutorials. A lot of my ideas for that were things I wouldn't necessarily make a whole project out of, and I didn't want to like say each of my tutorials is a project in itself. It's maybe just a crochet stitch you might like to try, or to show a technique, for example, ways of joining granny squares, things like that. So for those tutorials, I can just make a small sample. And if you do watch my tutorials, some of these, like this is the polka dot granny square that came out just before Christmas. That's a free tutorial on my YouTube channel. We've got how to crochet cables. That was fun. I really enjoyed that. And there are like swatches in here that haven't become tutorials. Like this was a bit more of a complicated cable pattern that didn't become a tutorial. This one was one of the most popular videos of 2025. That's crochet gingham and it's reversible. This one's quite a popular one on my channel as well. This stitch, which is just single crochets and double crochets, very beginner friendly, that one. So yeah, so there's a lot in here that have become tutorials. Some of them haven't. Some of them will become tutorials in the future. That was one from the summer. This is kind of like an ongoing project because I intend to continue putting up tutorials on my channel for the foreseeable future. But each one of these is like a little project in itself because I make it and then I make a tutorial about it. So I kind of see that as a finished project in itself. But for purposes of like counting how many projects I did in 2026, I'm not counting this as a finished project. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, this giant full overflowing basket that needs to be better storage options. It would be really nice actually if one day I could take all of these samples, maybe not this hexagon, but maybe all of these like stitch samples and little mini granny squares and maybe sew them together into a really fun sampler. I think that could be really fun, which is why I'm like keeping them. I'm not like, I mean, what do you do with swatches apart from keep them and look at them and think about how pretty they are? I'm not going to throw them away. I've put a lot of work and time into these. So yeah, I'm just a little bit unsure. I think maybe one day it'll be some kind of crazy blanket. Yeah, it'll probably end up being huge as well. It'll probably be huge because I'm planning on doing tutorials on Meema Makes for the foreseeable future. How many tutorials and how many swatches I'm going to need to make for that. I've also done a lot of other swatching in 2025. 2025 was the year of swatching, not crochet swatching, more than knitting swatching, but also like I had to do so many swatches to get the squares, to get the quilt blocks right for those imagination quilt blankets, like so many swatches in all different yarns with all different techniques to try and like get the right techniques. So yeah, we'll call swatching a project. So the first project that I finished in 2025 that's a knitting project was a pair of socks. It's actually my only pair of socks that I knitted in 25. No, it's not. I've got a work in progress pair of socks. Because it's so dark, I've got like a studio light and it's kind of washing the colour out a little bit of this. If I bring it too close, there we are. So these socks are, I call them my Winnie the Pooh socks. The yarn that I'm using is a Winnie the Pooh inspired hand-dyed yarn from Giddy Yarns. And it's a sock weight merino nylon blend, just a standard sock yarn. It's lovely. It's this yellow colour with these red speckles to represent his little shorts. No, he wears a red t-shirt, does he? He wears a red t-shirt. And the pattern was socks on a plane. It's just a free pattern. But what I did is the pattern is for toe-up socks. I wanted to do them cuff down, so I just literally took the cable chart and just put it on just a standard sock down with a heel flap and gusset construction here. Because of my joint problems, I'm finding sock knitting. I've tried casting on a couple of pairs of sock weight socks since I finished these. I finished these in like this summer and they're still on their blockers because I've wanted to show them in a video before I start wearing them, because like they get all bobbly and stuff. They just look nicer if I show them like this. So yeah, I'm probably going to take these off and put them in my sock drawer finally. But yeah, so what was I saying? Because of my joint problems that I've had this year, I'm finding it really difficult to knit with such tiny needles. I used to really enjoy just having a pair of socks on the go, and sometimes they take me a really long time to knit, but I just like having that portable project. I can just get out in front of the TV. So I've not been able to knit any other sock weight socks, which is a shame because I've got a lot of sock sets waiting to be knitted into beautiful socks like these. But I do have a DK weight pair of socks I'll show you a bit later. So yeah, so that was my first finished knitting project. I'm going to preface this to say that you're going to see a video dedicated to this project in a few weeks' time, because I have vlogged myself knitting this jumper. It was a bit of a bigger undertaking than I expected, but it's my first ever dedicated knitting vlog. And I kind of take you from the very beginning to the very end. Yeah, I haven't actually finished filming the vlog yet though. And I'll kind of explain that when I show you the jumper. But yeah, that should be coming in a few weeks' time. I'm really excited to share that with you. What I did is I wanted to, so if you're in the UK or even in the knitting online community, there was a TV series in November and December in the UK called The Game of Wool, which was kind of like the Great British Bake Off, but for knitting and crochet. And there's been a lot of controversy about it. Like, there's been a lot of people online saying the challenges are unrealistic, blah, blah, blah. But they would only give you 12 hours to, like, knit a jumper. Like, the challenges were, some of them were a bit ridiculous. So I thought it would be a really fun idea for a video to time myself and see actually how many hours does it take you to knit a jumper. So that's the theme of my vlog, is I've timed myself and I show you my camera, like my timer on my camera at the screen, like whenever I do knit. I've got a detailed record of like how long it took me to knit each sleeve, how long it took me to do the short row shaping, how long it took me to do the collar, things like that. And then I've got like a total at the end for how long it took me to knit. I don't quite have a finished total yet though, because like I said, I haven't woven in any of the ends. So I should probably show you this jumper. I've been talking about it and I've not shown you it. I could probably put it on though. Should I put it on? I'm going to put it on. This needs blocking so badly, but ta-da! Show you that we've still got ends to weave in. The sleeves need blocking. They're not quite long enough. The body's not quite long enough as well. Everything's a little bit too tight, but I know this is going to grow a lot with blocking. So the pattern is the Doppio sweater by Sung Hee Hong. Hope I've remembered that name right. And it is a great raglan, compound raglan sweater, stockinette sweater. And the magic thing about the Doppio pattern is the gauge. So she uses 2 strands of sock yarn with a strand of mohair. So that's what I did. If I bring this in so you can see the 3 colours. Oh, there we are, look at that. You can see all those colours. So the 3 yarns that I used were, if I get them out, I can show you. So the colourful yarn that I used was this one. This is a Sanderson Sisters themed yarn from Curated Yarn Co. It's got purple, orange and green, but it's mostly purple and orange with bits of green. It's a variegated yarn. And then I paired that with another sock yarn. So this one is this. It's a very, very subtle pink, very, very subtle. It's coming across as cream on camera, but it's a very, very subtle pink with blue and red speckles. And this yarn was from Lay Family Yarn, and it's the colour Herkle Durkle. I'm getting a little bit tangled with my ends hanging off my arms. And this is a Suri Silk lace yarn from Schachenmayr Yarn called Spirit's Meat? Spirit's Meat. That's coming across very yellow on camera. It's not very yellow. It's a subtle pinky grey with some variegation in there. There is yellow in there. There's also orange, blue and pink. And it's very, very subtle and pastel-y and very like grey. It doesn't look grey on camera, but it's a little bit grey. And it gives, I think it gives this jumper a very hazy effect. It's very hazy and I love it. I love the fit. I love the fit here. Perhaps the yoke length is a little long here, so the length from here to the armpit. It's a little long for my size, but apart from that, this is the best fitting raglan I've ever knitted. It's got a compound raglan, so that's where when you're doing your raglan increases, the raglan is a way of constructing your shoulders. And when you do your increases, a normal raglan you just increase the same on the sleeve bit here and the body bit here. But on a compound raglan, you increase at different rates as you work down to get a more fitted shoulder. And I love this. I want to knit another one. I finished this, I put it on. I've not even woven in my ends or blocked it. And I immediately want to knit another one. And I went into my stash and I found like, I could probably knit like 4 of these from my stash. And I might, it was very addictive to knit. And I haven't actually done the final maths of how many hours, but I don't feel like it was like excessive because it's knit on 6mm needles. So it's quite a big loose gauge, but I love it. I love this so much. I'm so excited to wear it. I'm tempted to weave in the ends and film the last part of the vlog this evening so that I can wear it in a couple of days' time and finish off filming, but I have a lot to do today, so I don't think I will. But yeah, I'm going to get changed back into the jumper that I was wearing because like I can't show you stuff with these like dangling from my hands. I need to weave these ends in so bad. Oh yeah, so I was just about to take this off, hence why my microphone's in my hand. So I was just about to take this off. I forgot to say, this is finished. I have finished. The hem is finished. I have cast off. I cast off at like 1:45 on Christmas Day or something silly like that. So yeah, this is finished, just needs end weaving and blocking. So I'm calling it. It's in my finished projects because otherwise I'd only have one finished knitting project for 2025 and that would be a little bit ridiculous. So now I have 2. So I've had a bit of a disaster and I managed to record the rest of this video without any audio playing. I think I must have accidentally turned off my microphone. So hello kitty cat, you want to say hello? You haven't appeared in this video yet. Anyway, what was I saying? So I am not up for refilming the rest of this video. It's all of my works in progress. I am not up for refilming it. I had to wait about 3 or 4 weeks until I was well enough to film the video anyway. If you don't know, I've got some disabilities and I have chronic fatigue, so it can be quite difficult to film these podcast style episodes. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do a voiceover, and you can just see her tail. I'm going to do a voiceover and use some of that footage as well as a bunch of projects. Hello, darling. You really want to appear in this, don't you? What was I saying? I'm going to do a voiceover. I'll use the footage. I'll use some photos I've taken of my projects. I'll go through them all briefly, give you yarn and pattern details, but I will go in depth into them a little bit more in a future podcast episode. I'm hoping to put one up in February, so I'll go through all of those projects then. So yeah, let's jump into my works in progress whilst my cat gives me a cuddle. The first project is a ripple blanket that I started in December 2024. Unfortunately, due to my joint problems in early 2025, I did have to put this blanket down for quite a long time. I got around about halfway through the number of rows that I wanted to do. The stitch pattern is my own design, and I intended this blanket to be a crochet along and a YouTube tutorial in spring 2025. But due to those health problems and my scheduled surgery, I had to put those plans on hold indefinitely. I'm planning on calling this the Ripple a Day blanket because my thoughts for the crochet along was you do 1 row a day for I think it's 96 days and then you have a blanket at the end of it. So I am still hoping to run this as a crochet along. I'm going to try and squeeze it in with my plans in 2026. So just a quick little explanation about the colours that I used. I used 12 shades of Yarn Smith's Merino DK. So that's the same yarn that I used for the Granny Love shawl that I showed you earlier. I really like this yarn as it's a fairly affordable merino yarn and it comes in a whole range of colours. And the great thing about Yarn Smith's yarn is they colour match across their different fibres. So you could use these same colours in their acrylic yarn or their cotton yarn, and you could still work the same pattern with the same colours and kind of customise it to whatever fibre you want to work with. So my plan is to talk to Wool Warehouse who stock my yarn packs and see if they would be open to doing multiple yarn packs for this crochet along in the different fibre options, and I think that's going to be quite exciting. I really love the colours that I chose as well. The colours that I chose, I kind of challenged myself not to use my favourite colour, that pale pink that I seem to use in like every single crochet project that I do, every single crochet blanket, and I wanted to go for a bit of a cooler vibe for the colours but still a little bit vintage, and I think I achieved that. I do think this looks like a vintage blanket, and yeah, I'm really happy and I can't wait for this crochet along. So the other blanket work in progress I have is one that I've already shown on this channel. I showed it in my crochet with me videos and in my Yorkshire Yarn Festival vlog. So this is a stash busting solid granny square blanket. I'm holding 2 strands of hand-dyed sock yarn together with a 4mm crochet hook to make these solid granny squares. I have a tutorial for this solid granny square pattern on my channel that's free down in the description. The yarn that I'm using, it is stash busting yarn, but there is a bit of an emotional story behind this blanket, and I got quite upset actually when I was filming it. So maybe I will go into that story with you in the next podcast, and maybe I will not be so tearful about it. And the next project is actually a Tunisian crochet project I've had on the go since October 2024, so this has appeared in my last podcast episode in November 2024. So this is a triangular Tunisian crochet shawl, and I'm planning for this pattern because it's going to be a pattern and a tutorial, and I'm planning for this to be the perfect first project for anyone new to Tunisian crochet. It uses Tunisian simple stitch, which is the first Tunisian crochet stitch most beginners learn, and then we use some increases and decreases to make this triangular shape, and it will just be a great first Tunisian crochet project for pretty much anyone. So this is made in some hand-dyed sock yarn mini skeins, which were a Halloween set from 2024 from Beehive Yarns called Poison Garden, and a 4.5mm Tunisian crochet hook. I am planning on doing a second sample for this blanket because obviously that yarn's discontinued. I've talked in previous episodes about how much disappointment people had when they couldn't get yarn for patterns in the past when I've released patterns. So my plan is to work up some potentially 2 more samples actually. One in Skepier's Whirl, which is a beautiful fingering weight gradient yarn, and potentially one in some of my hand spun as well. I think that could be a fun personal project for me. So that's all of my crochet works in progress. So let's move on to my knitting works in progress. First up is this jumper. This is the Foxberry pattern by Sari Nordland, which is a circular yoke with lace and bubbles. I started this on Christmas Day 2024, but ended up stopping working on this in early 2025 due to my joint issues, and I've struggled to pick it up since because the weather's been so warm. I've not wanted to knit with fluffy yarn. So I picked this back up recently actually in Twixmas, which is the period of time between Christmas and New Year's. Once I finished knitting the Doppio, this was kind of the knitting project I decided to prioritise next. If you've watched previous podcast episode, you might recognise this yarn because it's from a frogged project. So I got about halfway through knitting the Moby sweater by Petite Knit, and I just wasn't happy with the marriage between the yarn that I chose and the pattern. I felt like the yarn is very feminine and the Moby sweater is a very masculine pattern, and I'm not usually one for like genders of things, but it just felt like it wasn't the right fit for the project. Kind of hard to explain where my brain went with that, and I just don't get on well with Petite Knit patterns anyway. The way that she writes her patterns just doesn't gel well with my brain. So I frogged it. It was difficult to frog because it is a strand of sock yarn held with a strand of suri, so it was really difficult to frog. But I did frog it, and I'm so much happier with this pattern and yarn combination. So the sock yarn that I'm using is Filcolana Arvetta, which is just like a standard sock yarn, and I can't remember the colour. I haven't written it down. I haven't written down what colour it is, so I'll put it on the screen for you. And I'm holding that with a strand of hand-dyed suri silk from a dyer called Hedgerow Yarns. She doesn't seem to be dyeing anymore. She's not done an update for quite a long time. This is actually a very subtly semi-solid, and sometimes I get these areas of a darker pink showing through, which I kind of love, but then because there's so much variation across the skein, I'm having big sections without those darker areas, so I'm a bit concerned that this is just going to look like it's maybe a bit dirty or something. I'm not sure. I don't really care at this point. I just want this project done. So I've had a lot of fun just knitting this because I'm currently on the body where I'm just knitting stockinette in the round. My other knitted garment project is actually one I've been talking about since 2023, kind of about the time I started doing this podcast actually. So this is the Amy cardigan by Joji Locatelli, which is a boxy fit stockinette cardigan with these colour blocks of 5 colours. So it's actually a sport weight pattern, but I'm using some stash colours of a hand-dyed sock yarn from a few different dyers actually. So I'll put a picture up on the screen of the yarn. So the yarn that I used was, the top one is Red Squirrel from the dyer Ducky Darlings. The second one down is Apricity from Fiberfox. The next one down is Crema from Beehive Yarns, and this photographs is cream, but in real life it's a very soft pink. It is almost cream, but it definitely has a bit of a pink tinge. I really love it actually. I think it's a perfect like warm background colour, and it sets off the other colours beautifully. I really love that colour. And then the second one from the bottom is Seafoam from Fiberfox, and then the one below that is Devil's Bayou from Fiberfox, and these are all on their sock yarn bases, whatever sock yarn base they carry. So I initially started this in autumn 2024, but I only knitted like 5 rows and then put it away because I got distracted by another project. But when I found out I would be having my surgery in April, so the surgery was for severe endometriosis, and I didn't know how my recovery would go. I really struggled the first time I had endometriosis surgery, and they didn't even do anything. They just kind of like had a look around and then stopped. That was a really rough recovery for me actually, so I was kind of anticipating that again, and I knew I'd want a mindless project. So my goal before my surgery was to knit the yoke, so from the top of the neck to the bottom of the armpits, so where I've split for sleeves, and then it's literally just stockinette in rows for rows and rows and rows and rows and rows, and I thought that would be really good for my recovery. So my recovery actually went really well, and I got lots and lots of knitting done, and I think I actually managed to finish the body fairly quickly, and then the sleeves have just been dragging, and I haven't picked this project up for a few months now, like to the point where I've taken the needles off because I can't be bothered to cast off this second sleeve. But all I need to do is cast off this second sleeve, decide if I want to add a little bit of extra length to the body because I want to try it on with it finished, and then do that if I want to add length to the body, and then knit the button band and it will be finished. So I probably should just like pull my finger out because this will probably not take me very long to finish, and I know that I will wear this a lot when it's done. So maybe I should be prioritizing this knitting project over my Foxberry, but the Foxberry it's my favorite shade of pink, and I can't resist a bit of suri when it's so cold this time of year. So anyway, the final work in progress is a pair of socks. The yarn that I'm using is the leftovers from the DK Imagination Quilts, that hearth inspired yarn advent with 24 colours. I'm using the leftovers, and some of the colours had literally 2 grams left, and some of the colours had 10 grams left. So what I did is I used my really accurate scales and I split each of the colours in half exactly by weight, and then I joined them together and wound them into a ball. Some people would call this a magic knot ball, but I don't trust magic knots. In my experience, they come apart over time, especially if it's something that's going to be going into the washing machine. So what I do instead is I join them with a Russian join. I've shown this in a tutorial below. It's a really great way of doing a knotless join for different colours of yarn. Anyway, the pattern, I'm not following a pattern actually. I'm just doing toe up, DK weight, ribbed socks with a short row heel. So that's everything that I made in 2025. I'll put that video about the Imagination quilt up on your screen if you fancy watching that next, and I'll see you next week for another video.